Well, I am now introducing our speaker. Let me see where it is. So where did it go? Sorry. I am very happy to introduce Louise Gardner. After 40 years in the retail travel industry and as executive leader of Carlson Wagonlit Travel's North America Leisure Division, Louise retired on January 1st, 2019. Returning to the industry in 2020, she was appointed as Vice President of the Agency Solution, a division of the travel agent next door, a part-time contract opportunity for her to re-energize small travel agency business owners across Canada by providing services that support these storefront agencies with their back-end operational needs. She continues to serve as treasurer on the Association of Canadian Travel Agency Board of Directors. Louise has been a Rotarian for over 27 years. She is a Paul Harris Fellow +5 recipient, an RI benefactor, and an RLI graduate. She has taken on many roles in her Rotary career, including president of her Rotary Club in 2002 and 2020, and earned RI citations on both years. She is currently past president of Kitchener Rotary and incoming chair of the Kitchener Rotary Club Charitable Foundation. Louise currently chairs the program IWD Youth and KRCCF and RCK Foundation committees. During her career, she was honored with the CWT Outstanding Associate Branch of the Year and the KW Better Business Bureau Integrity Award, and was nominated as Kitchener-Waterloo Woman of the Year for her philanthropic Rotary service. Louise received the District 7080 Club Builder Award in June 2022. With this, I will hand it over to Louise, and thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you, Suzanne. I'm really excited. So I'm just going to share my screen so we can, oh, there's my lovely husband, also a Rotarian, Graham. All right. I hope everybody can see chairing an effective meeting. I'm really excited to be presenting this today. I wanted to make note that this particular presentation and the PowerPoint style is very word heavy because it's much more educational than it is motivational and collaborative. So you're going to see words and lots of words and more words and very little photos. So I encourage you to either take screen caps if there's something of interest for you there, or actually just take a picture of the screen with your cell phone. But as Suzanne mentioned previously, this is being recorded and the recording will be available on the district website so that you can go find it and then share it with your committee chairs or your board or anyone at work, etc., that might need the information that I'm going to be moving forward on. So without further ado, let's get started. So today's agenda and why this slide is important. I'm going to do a bit more of an introduction and more on what I've done in my career that relates to this particular topic. But as you can see, we have 60 minutes. So I've chunked my time down: introduction at 5, chairing and planning at 15, running a meeting and minutes of a meeting for 15, and closing and follow up. So what I'm doing right now, as we've started, is I'm actually starting my clock at 55 minutes, and we are at 9:35, so that I make sure that I'm done exactly at 10:30. And that cell phone will sit beside me and there'll be a ding when we get to that time point. So I'll know to make sure that I'm on time. And I'm constantly watching. I've got my power presentation notes beside me, and that I encourage chairs to do that, where you've got your agenda and you time out your agenda so you know whether you're ahead or behind. And this is pretty important when you're talking about board meetings, because usually as a president, if you're chairing a board meeting and you set a 2-hour time frame, guaranteed it's going to go over 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And it's always nice for people to know that they can trust you to keep your meetings on time. And that means you've got to be able to facilitate those meetings. And how do you cut off really important conversations? And how do you do all of that? And that's exactly what we're going to talk about in today's presentation. So if you have any questions, I'm not necessarily going to see the chat, but put them in there, and then we'll be able to make sure we address them during the Q&A. And of course, there'll be that live opportunity as well. So introduction, here I am. I led CWT for 15 years. I was an associate owner. I live in Kitchener-Waterloo. I was an owner of an agency here. I've never been a travel agent. I've always worked on the business side. I started as an accountant for a travel agency, and then ended up being partial owner. And then we sold to tripcentral.ca. I became their vice president. And then I moved on to CWT in 2004. And I ran the North American Leisure Division for 15 years. So I oversaw a team of 250 employees. I had 35 branch locations. I had a network of franchisees of 120 locations across Canada. I'm fully bilingual. I was born in Montreal, so the French helped out there for sure. And then my husband, Graham, some of you may know, had a double lung transplant in December of 2017. So 5 years, he's celebrating and he's doing really well. He's skiing, he's golfing, and life is good. So I retired. I just couldn't do both. I had to be his primary caregiver. And then in around mid-2019, I came back as vice president of the agency solution, which I do today as a contract position. I've sat on several boards for travel. TICO, if you know of it, is Ontario's travel regulator, run by the province of Ontario. I sat on that board for 5 years, and I'm currently the treasurer of ACTA. I've been on that board for the last 7 years, which is our trade association. So lots on my work life. In my Rotary life, you can see the lovely picture of Graham and I. Graham joined Rotary in 1990, and I joined in 1994. And as you've heard before, I've done quite a few things in my Rotary career and very proud of it. So I want to show you a funky little meeting video, and maybe you can see yourself in here, but I love this one, and I always enjoy watching it. So without further ado, I'm just going to move to our little opening video, which is 3 minutes in length.
And we were at this restaurant.
All right, guys, you guys ready to get started?
Hang on a second.
Trip, you ready to get started, buddy?
Okay, hey, you guys, we're all here. We should start.
All right, thanks for coming, guys. I just wanted to take a few minutes and talk about some ideas for the marketing strategy this year. So if you got one, just throw it out there. I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, how long is this meeting supposed to last? The schedule wasn't exactly clear.
Should be out of here in 30.
Is that approximate or?
Hey guys, sorry I'm a couple minutes late. I got caught in traffic.
7 minutes, actually.
What's that?
A couple is 2.
So what we're doing is we're just coming up with some ideas for our new marketing strategy.
Sure.
So, anyone?
I think we should implement Pinterest.
Ooh, that's a fun idea.
What about a publicity event in the park?
Interesting. But how are you going to plan around the weather? What if it rains?
So we'll party in the rain.
Okay, just want to emphasize there's no bad ideas here. We're just brainstorming. So.
Yeah, I'm just really thinking it'll be a huge waste of money to try to plan around the weather.
Yeah, okay, we get your concerns. Nancy, thank you.
Okay, anyone else have an idea? Ephraim?
I've always wanted to see rain fall down all at once in a big splash instead of small drops over time. I mean, think how it could impact the irrigation system.
Okay. Terry?
Well, I have an idea from my previous job that I had last year. But, let me take that back a little bit. I have this wonderful idea, but it doesn't really make sense unless I just take it back a second and bring it forward together. It was like 3 weeks ago that I remember he said something that I couldn't understand.
Hold on a second, Terry. Hold on. Thanks for pointing. Here's what we need to do, okay? Lauren, you got this? We do a video submission contest on YouTube.
Oh, that's been done.
It'll be on Facebook, it'll be on Pinterest, it'll be on Twitter.
If we do something with technology, we lose the senior demographic.
So, you guys want to see an example?
Should we be moving on to the next topic? I mean, it's already 1:15.
Quarter after. That's funny.
Who knows how to put this on the screen? up there, because you're not going to be able to, I want you to see all the details. We have a cable. Does this cable work?
I think that's power.
I don't know if on the there's an
This one.
HDMI
That
port,
cord's not gonna be long
in
enough.
the back.
Does that
there
remote
could be
go to
like
the
2 or 3,
TV?
like HDMI 1,
Plenty of time,
HDMI
guys.
2,
No rush.
HDMI
This isn't
3,
working.
I got a
and
green
then they
marker.
coincide
Call the
with
IT
each
guy.
other with,
Wait,
there's
turn
also,
what off and back
what
on?
do you call it? S-video.
Hello?
Okay, I've got it working.
Hit play. Okay, now imagine hundreds of those floating around the web. Do you want to watch it one more time?
No, please.
Trip, I think you're onto something with this idea. I really like it. Carol, did you get that down?
Yep, got it.
Sorry, what is C-test up sub YT pros?
Well, I'm abbreviating to make room for all these great ideas. Contest, uploading it to YouTube, funniest, and you get a prize.
Wait, where are the other ideas?
And time.
Wait, where y'all going? We still have 100% of the things to accomplish.
All right. Who has been in that meeting? Or who recognizes themselves in that meeting? I will tell you, based on my presentation today, I'm the clock watcher.
Do this with ice water tonight to erase up to 67 pounds of stubborn fat.
Here, I got it.
Did you know that the difference between overweight and lean people is not the number of calories you consume?
All right, let me get rid of that. Sorry about that. All right. I think that will hold her for a bit. Hopefully the sound won't come back on again. All right, so let's move on. So now we are at chairing and planning 15 minutes, but when I look at my stopwatch here, I have 47 minutes left. So I'm running a little bit behind time. So now I know I kind of got to speed it up a little bit. So here we go. So this segment is all around chairing and planning a meeting. So the agenda for this is we're going to talk about chairing and co-chairing responsibilities, who, when, where, what, and why, how to prepare your agenda, and what a quorum is. So chairing and co-chairing responsibilities. So everyone has a responsibility to arrive on time and finish on time, but specifically the chair and the co-chairs. And sticking to the agenda is important. Being respectful and being open-minded is also important. And hearing all the views one at a time, but balancing getting through the business. So how do you do that when you're chairing a meeting and you've got a lot of agenda items and you might have 5 or 6 people sitting in the conversation and you want to make sure that everyone has a turn? So you're going to have people on your committee that are very outspoken, and you're going to have people on your committee that are going to ramble, and you're going to have people on your committee that don't ever say anything because they're afraid of speaking up. So as a chair, it is absolutely your responsibility to make sure that you can atone for all of those different things and make sure that the one that doesn't speak as much has an opportunity to weigh in, and the one that is basically taking control of the meeting is curbed. But you have to do it in a respectful way. Always avoiding side conversations. So I think in the Zoom world, we've learned this a lot more, but I think if you're in an in-person meeting, it is very interesting where you will have a couple of people who start to talk about things beside them, you know, chair beside chair, and you kind of lose the sense of the whole conversation. So if you do see people that are having side conversations, it's perfectly respectful to call them out and ask them to join the main conversation. Always clarifying if there's decisions that need to be made versus conversations, and we'll have a little bit about that on future slides. And you as the chair should not be dominating the meeting. It is not up to you to be the one that's having all the ideas and finalizing. You have to make sure that it is collaborative in the way and facilitating as you walk your way through the meeting. And understand that you are not a miracle worker. As the chair, you are the facilitator. It's your role to make sure that everyone has a say and that it's a collaborative meeting and that there is cooperation. But sometimes that just can't happen. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on. And you know, it's time to cultivate some relationships. So a meeting is an opportunity, whether it's on Zoom or in person, you know, to have people that are outside of Rotary. So don't feel that if you're having a committee meeting, it always has to be just your committee members. If there's a topic that you can bring in a different Rotarian, a different member of the club, or a member of another club, if you think there's value to that person attending your meeting, or even a friend of Rotary. So make sure that you expand your meetings to have the right attendees there to make sure that you achieve the goal of that particular session. The who, when, where, what, and why of a meeting. So you always want to be able to confirm attendance prior to a meeting. And a lot of, like our club uses doodle polls all the time. If you're not familiar with it, it's a free application. I've given you the website here that you can click through to once you get the presentation itself. But Doodle is a company that offers a free opportunity where you go in, you can put the title of the meeting, you can choose a variety of dates and times so that you can send out a band of timing and say, are you available on this date, this date, this date? Because if you try to do this in an email, who's available this date? And then everybody responds, or they don't, and who's available that date? So use Doodle. It's an amazing tool. Time of day, how often, what to bring. People need to know, is it, 30 minutes pre or post the Rotary meeting? Is this a meeting only when needed? Is there going to be coffee there? Or should you bring your own coffee? These are all things that people wonder before they actually get to a meeting. And is it going to be at the Rotary meeting? Is it going to be a Zoom meeting? Is it going to be a restaurant meeting? So always giving them information. I think this is pretty standard stuff. Why? What's the mission of the meeting? Is it just for information gathering? Is it to generate ideas? Is there going to be decision making? Is it a combo? Especially if you're doing a board meeting, it's always good in advance to have an agenda that says there is going to be, just sharing of information on what the program committee is doing, but there is going to be a decision that's going to be made during the session where we talk about membership. So knowing in advance what the attendees are expected to do and when and where, the more detail you have in your agenda, the better off you can be. Preparing your agenda. So here's some agenda tips. Create a draft agenda and then distribute it a couple of days prior to the meeting. Now, this all takes time, and then, we all know Rotary is a volunteer organization. Sometimes this is easier to do when it's within your business environment because people are mandated. You're the leader. They have to do what you tell them to do. Not happening in a Rotary meeting. So if you can, I will pre-qualify that, create a draft agenda and distribute it 3 or more days prior. And then consult the committee. Is the agenda full or is this something else that needs to be added? Always distribute a hard copy if you have an in-person meeting, because I guarantee you, if you've got 6 people coming to your meeting, print 6 agendas because no one's going to bring one, or very few people will bring one. Zoom obviously is a bit different because it's right on the screen. And oftentimes during a committee meeting, what we do at our club is we will actually just share the agenda itself and as we walk through it so that it's on the screen. Again, create a consistent template. So your agenda can be in a Word or an Excel document. I highly recommend that you don't put the agenda in an email. So if you put your agenda in the body of the email, unless it's a very quick 15, 20, 30-minute meeting and you only have 1 or 2 items, because what happens is that those emails, your inbox, you have thousands of emails in there. You're never finding it. So if you do it as a Word attachment or an Excel attachment, whichever format you prefer, that is much appreciated. And then having the same template meeting after meeting has some consistency. It makes it easier for your attendees to follow. As much as possible, include the timing and who is leading each of those agenda sections. So I use a Word document. On the left-hand side, I have the agenda items, and then on the right-hand side in boxes, I have who is responsible, how much time they have, and when they're going to present in that meeting. And then again, clarify discussion versus decision. We'll talk about that in a second. And always attach any information that is pre-reading requirement. A quorum. In a meeting, decision making requires a majority. So here's a couple of tips on a quorum. A quorum, a board of 12 requires 7. A committee of 3 requires 2. If you do not have 7 of your 12 board members at your meeting and you only have 6 or less, you cannot make a decision. You cannot pass a motion. Same with a committee, and motions and decisions are different, but discussions without a quorum are absolutely appropriate. So you call a board meeting and you know what, the weather's bad and it was in person and only 5 people show up. You can actually have a lot of discussions, but you cannot pass any motions and you cannot make, or you should not make any decisions. Because what happens is if you have less than your quorum, either at a committee meeting or at a board meeting, or if you're doing an annual AGM with your club, then it can lead to some misunderstandings in the future because you don't have a consensus, you don't have a majority. So try to reach decisions by consensus is another way. You don't always have to have motions, especially during a committee. I mean, you can have motions in a committee meeting if you're talking about a lot of money, spending, thousands of dollars on a committee project, for example. But just having a consensus without a motion is absolutely appropriate. And it's the same for a board meeting. There doesn't always need to be a motion. Sometimes the chair can say, do we have a consensus? Everybody puts their hand up. You're good to move on to the next, as opposed to actually minuting with motions. So keep your motions to things that are really important or things that are required as per your club bylaws. Taking a decision to a vote actually forces an outcome, and it must be documented in the minutes, especially if it's a financial consideration. So again, if you're going to absolutely have a vote, and I will tell you, I've sat on some boards, especially some government boards. I have a board book that is about this thick about how to run board meetings, and they're pretty intensive when it comes to government. Boards like unanimous. When you're a chair of a board, you're really striving for unanimous, and some boards will not pass motions unless they are unanimous, or abstentions are fine due to a conflict of interest. But no board really likes to document that somebody is against something, because that can haunt you when you get down, further down in the path of the project or the decision that you're making. So that's why consensus, especially in Rotary when it's voluntary, is good. As I said, but you have to watch, because your bylaws might state, for example, if you're bringing a new member in, there must be a vote by the board. You have no choice. And therefore you must have votes. And so when you bring a vote to the table, there's a lot of discussion that happens, and the motions can be changed during the discussion period. And as a chair, you're always watching to see, am I going to make sure that I'm going to get a fairly consistent or a majority vote, a yay? And if you're feeling that there's some dissension, you might pull that motion off until the next meeting, the next committee meeting or the next board meeting, to make sure that you're getting closer to full consensus versus okay, well, yeah, we voted it in, but it was only a 7-6 split or a 7-5 split. Maybe that's not enough if you're moving a project forward. So keep that consideration in mind. So now we're going to be running a meeting, and 15 minutes left on that. And I'm at 9:54. So I'm looking at my printed schedule here. And when I get to running a meeting, I should be at 9:50. And I'm checking my time now, and I'm at 9:54. So again, I'm 5 minutes behind. So less chatting, more presentation. Running a meeting and minute taking. So we're going to talk about introductions, terms of engagement, a parking lot, collaboration, discussion versus decision, violent agreement, violent disagreements, and taking minutes at a meeting. So introductions are not always needed, but always ensure that everybody knows each other. So if you have new attendees, please make sure that they have an opportunity to introduce themselves. And use an icebreaker, especially if you're doing, it's a new board meeting, it's a new year, and you have new board members. Everybody probably knows what an icebreaker is, but I will explain it. What's your favorite movie? So who are you? How long have you been in Rotary? What club are you with? Or, what committees are you representing if it's your own board meeting? If you're bringing friends of Rotary in, what do you do for a living? And then an icebreaker addition could be, what's your favorite movie? Just to give people a tone of who you are. And it just eases and makes things a little bit friendlier in a meeting, especially for those that don't like to speak up. It makes them feel more comfortable because they've had an opportunity to hear that other people are normal and, have good things that happen to them or are crazy or whatever it is. And you always want a whiteboard, especially if you're in an in-person meeting, have a flip chart at the front of the room or a whiteboard or something that's visual that everybody can see. So what is everybody looking to get out of this meeting? And, I've presented at RLI, and I'm an RLI graduate, Rotary Leadership Institute, which is happening in April. I highly recommend, if you haven't taken it, that you do go, because some of these things are actually, talked about during those sessions. But, at the front of the room, I've always loved when a speaker that's presenting a session asks me, what am I looking for? What am I looking for in this particular session? And it's going to be different for different people. And the nice part about it is at the end of the meeting, you go back to this whiteboard and you say, have your expectations been met? And now as a committee member, I feel that my voice is heard. So if I went because I want to make sure that we do X, and at the end of the meeting, we did talk about doing X, well, I feel good. But if I go thinking we're going to be talking about X and the whole hour is talking about Y, I'm confused as to why I'm there in the first place. I probably won't show up to the next meeting. So that gives you some opportunity for engagement. Speaking of engagement, the terms of engagement, everyone at the meeting needs to know the simple rules to ensure that no one person takes it personally if they're needed to be reminded about something. So you set a list of expectations. Are you allowed to be on your cell phones? I mean, I've been at meetings where, it's budget time and we know that people are going to be coming and going because they have to do certain things in their meeting. So maybe it's appropriate for people to leave during a meeting, but maybe it's not. Can they use their cell phones? Is food and drink allowed? What's the timing? What's the participation, etc. Start and end of meeting. Start them on time. Come 5 minutes early. I mean, I've seen a lot of organizations that set their Zoom meetings for, 5 minutes before the hour, 5 minutes after the hour, to allow for a little bit of wiggle room. Be fully prepared. If somebody sends you, your chair sends you an agenda and some information for you to read prior to the meeting, be considerate and read it before you get there. And the biggest thing at a meeting is to listen. And I just read a Harvard article about listening, and I'm speaking to you for an hour. I can only speak 125 words per minute. Your brain can comprehend 1,000+ words per minute. So the big problem with me presenting and you listening is that you're listening 1/10 of the time because your brain is off doing something else. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, I don't remember what Louise said the last 5 minutes ago. And then you're trying to catch up, and I might ask you a question and you're totally confused. And then you're like, well, I've lost it. I may as well just go do my cell phone or, look at something else. So listening is really key. Don't talk amongst yourselves. Don't interrupt other people, and pay attention to the circle of control. So as a chair, when you're chairing a meeting, you can tell right out of the gate, after about the first 10 minutes, who's really paying attention and who's not paying attention. And I can tell, the biggest problem with Zoom is people go off video camera. So now I don't know what Jim Moore is doing. I can see Jim Moore is on my meeting here, but Jim Moore could be in his kitchen getting a coffee, or he could be attentively listening. I could, oh, hi, Jim. He comes on, he's listening. I can see Bill, right? Bill Elliott, like his face is right in the screen. He's really interested in my topic. And I won't call anybody else out because it's not fair. But some people will actually not allow you to go off video because some chairs want to see that you're intent and that you're listening. So circle of control. And the thing that happens with circle of control is that you know you can only control so many people on your meeting. Right now we have 31 participants on the call. I probably can only control 3 or 4 of those participants based on my presentation style. The rest of them I've lost. Or may not. Maybe I have 30 people that are excited about this presentation. But at the end of the day, the circle of control is you know who you can control, and then those are the people you're going to start with the questions so that you can get the ball rolling. So create and review action items. So it's always important to have an action item list at the end of every meeting, and those should go in the minutes of your meeting. And then you record those, your own actions, what you said you're going to do, and then the actions of others, and then put it in your calendar. And always make sure an action item has a person attached to it when you're taking the minutes, and a timeline attached into it. And then we talked a lot about the consensus rules previously, but make sure that you do have a majority if you are going to take a vote. Otherwise, you just need to move into a consensus. So if you have a meeting, you don't have a quorum, you can do discussions, you can do a consensus, but you cannot do a motion or a vote on that particular item. The parking lot. I love the parking lot. The parking lot allows you to whiteboard or make sure that you have side notes that things are looked after. So flow of ideas that don't pertain to the agenda, and God help us, that happens a lot in Rotary. You start talking about one thing and then you end up talking about something else because you're on 3 committees at a time, and all of a sudden the majority of your meeting, your other committee is part of this committee, and you start talking about another topic. Can we just talk about this for a minute? That's great, but it is not really a great useful use of your time when you're trying to talk about, let's say, program, and all of a sudden you're talking about membership, because you need member engagement to make sure that your programs are working correctly. So what a good thing to do is to side note or whiteboard on a piece of paper. If you're on Zoom, you can whiteboard if you want to use a Zoom whiteboard. That functionality is available, or in person on your flip chart at the front. You know what? Talking about this membership as it relates to program is a good idea, but it's not really what we're here for today, because today we're talking about speakers and who are they going to be and what are the topics. So let's just park that, and maybe we do it at a different meeting, or if we have time, we'll do it at the end of this meeting. So what that allows the chair to do is respectfully take an item that's taking you off track from where you need to go from your current agenda and move that agenda forward. And then again, at the end, you want to circle back to your parking lot and say, here's 5 things we didn't get to. Let's add them to the next agenda. And that way you can keep track of it, and you can put it in your meeting, your minutes as well. And then one of the things that you can do, whether you're in person or in Zoom, is don't forget your cell phone, because your cell phone does have value in meetings. It allows you to take a photo of that parking lot. And then you don't need to be taking that great big piece of paper, that big flip chart home with you, which I've done countless times prior to remembering to use my cell phone, because then you've got to take it and, make sure that your minute taker is putting it in the meetings. So the minute taker should be using their cell phone, especially even during Zoom meetings, if there's a presentation and there's a slide that's important, to make sure that they are in the minutes. Collaboration, you always want to be inclusive. So make the roles and responsibilities doable. So really, we're a volunteer organization. And I have to tell you, at the end of the day, I go on a 1 hour, committee meeting for Rotary. And I, as the chair, am spending another hour after the meeting. So that 1 hour meeting turns into 2. And I sit on 3 committees, and that's 6. And then I'm going to my Rotary meeting on Monday, and then that's another 2. So that's like 8. So all of a sudden I'm spending 10, 20, 30 hours a week on Rotary. It's too much. I'm like, I can't do it. I leave Rotary. So make your roles and responsibilities doable, chunk it down, do less, and be respectful to time. Streamline the amount of governance. So yes, I've sat on boards that have huge governance. My as I said, my TICO board, which is a government board, had way more governance than any other board I've sat on. But in Rotary, try to streamline that. Try to make sure that there's, participation and you're engaging all of your members. Go around the table, get everybody's input, but don't single somebody out. If there's a person that's quiet, give them an opportunity to speak, but give preference to those who like to speak, because you're never going to make it equal. It's great to say, okay, we're going to go around the table and everybody has to say something. I do that in meetings because I know that who attends, and maybe, you start your committee meetings in July and you're not quite sure of the members of that committee, but by January, you have a pretty good idea. And you know what? If Suzanne's not somebody that's going to speak out, don't single her out. Just, let her be a participant that's more of a listener, and she'll bring value because she'll always remember what's going on at the meetings. Ask for volunteers. So if somebody comes up with an idea and says, you know what, I think we should do X, the worst thing you can do as a chair is say, that's a great idea. You go run with that. Because if you do that every time, they're not putting their hand up anymore, because they know that if they have an idea, it's their idea, then that becomes a problem. So they're going to be a little bit more quiet at the next meeting because they've already got 50 things they need to do for the club. They're not going to put their hand up. And sometimes I find that people will be more negative towards a good idea, especially those that have a lot on their plate already, because they just see it as sucking the life out of them. So they're like, yeah, I don't think that's a good idea. And then you have to go back and say, I think it is, but don't worry, this won't be your idea. We'll find somebody else in the club that has some bandwidth that can take it on. And if we are a smaller club and we know there's nobody, then you must table that idea. And that goes back to making sure the roles and responsibilities and the action items are actually doable. And don't stifle dissenters, because people who put up their hand and they're the half full glass person, they really bring good value to you and they're good contributors. So even if it might be a negative comment, they are still useful contributors to your meeting. Discussion versus decision. I'm just going to check my time here. Okay, we are good. Discussions are healthy, but sometimes they can go on too long without making a decision. And then what happens that you're actually drifting away and there's no action that's agreed upon. And I would say that this happens equally in committee meetings as it does in board meetings, and sometimes even if you're doing an annual general meeting at your Rotary meeting. The chair needs to always be listening and jotting down a few key points throughout. And the chair's responsibility is to remind the committee what the issue is and what the decisions need to be made. So you're trying to decide whether you're going to put a rib fest on or not. That is the action item. If you start talking about what day is the rib fest going to be, and is it going to be at this location or that location, in this particular segment of the conversation, you start going down that path and that becomes such a broad scope, you're never going to make the decision of whether you're doing it or not. And so you need to stay on topic, if I can, and try to narrow down. And that's where the chair's responsibility is to do that. Yes, there's going to be some ongoing conversations that will, are we having a rib fest? Are we not? Where you have to talk about things like the weather and the time of year and the location, but always remembering that the primary issue or topic and the decision is it a yes or a no? And don't assume that silence means agreement. So if you're talking about it and, two out of your, 5 members are, yeah, we should do this, and the others say nothing, that could be a no-go. So you have to make sure that as a chair, you have to bring back the conversation to, it seems that we agree that we're going to do a rib fest. Can we start with a consensus on that? Let's say you're not going to take it to a vote, but you want to take it to a consensus. And then you go around the room and say, Suzanne, what is your consensus? Do you consensus this? Or put your hand up, those that concede, and make sure that you visually see or you hear that there is a consensus. If it's a yes, then you recap the decision. Okay, we have decided that we are going to do a rib fest. And then you assign timelines and owners. Okay, who is going to move forward with chairing this particular item? Who is going to move forward with looking at the place that we're going to hold it, the date that we're going to hold it? Who's going to move forward with finding the rib vendors? And then you put it, and when are they going to do that by? Is that by the next meeting? Suzanne's going to come back with X, or Bill's going to come back with X, or Jim's going to come back with X? Is that within a week prior to the next meeting? Is it going to come back to us in an email? How and why is that? How is that going to be reflected? And then ensure that your minutes or your notes, and we'll talk about that in a moment, correctly reflect the action item, not only what's going to be done, who's going to be doing it, and when are they going to be doing it by. If it's a no, then you can take it to a vote if you want, and the majority wins, but you have to have a quorum. Or if you don't want to take it to a vote and you just don't think you're at the point where you can make that decision, and because if you take it to a vote and you've got, let's say, 6 people on your committee and 4 vote yes and 2 vote no, does that mean that those 2 people are going to leave your committee, or they're not going to be involved? If they don't agree with it, what kind of buy-in are you going to get at the next meeting? So you might actually want to defer and assign someone to go to do more research, find out more about the topic, and then bring it back at another meeting. Yes, that's going to delay it, but one thing that I've learned in business, and I've run a lot of meetings, and I've been on a lot of boards, is that if you don't get the buy-in at the very beginning of your stakeholders, and you just plow through and you think it's going to work out in the end, it's going to be a long haul. And it might not be as successful as you want it to be, especially when you're making some of those really big decisions about, a rib fest. That's a pretty big decision, because you know how many club members and how much focus and energy it's going to take and time to put that on. If it's a smaller topic, then no problem. You can just take the consensus or, take the vote and move on. But I would say if it's something major, you want to make sure that you have as much consensus as you can. Violent agreement and violent disagreement. So if the attendees agree, for heaven's sakes, move on. It is an absolute waste of time for everyone to give their own example as to why something's going to work. And we Rotarians love to talk. And I think that is the one thing in a Rotary committee meeting, maybe not on a board meeting, but definitely a committee meeting. We start talking about something, we just love talking about it. And everybody wants to have their say. And that is just such a waste of time. So if everybody agrees, yes, maybe 1 or 2 people will give an example of why this is a great idea. Great. It is the chair's responsibility to absolutely stop the conversation, take control, and move on to the next agenda item. Otherwise, your meeting's going to go over time. If there is violent disagreement, okay, we all think this is a terrible idea and only the chair is holding true to we should do X. Go back to your rules of engagement. Make sure that you are respectful, because if you have a head-to-head disagreement where one person totally disagrees with what another person is saying, you need to recap that. And then you need to move on to other members to see how they feel. So Rotarian, Susan is, yes, that's a good thing. And Bob is a no. And Susan and Bob are like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. As a chair, you need to remove that. Say, thank you for your comment, Susan. We know you agree. Thank you, Bob. We know you disagree. And here's the reasons why. Let's move on to some of the other committee members and get their viewpoints. Repetition should be noted, and then group discussions should be resumed. And then what suggestions do you have, or do we have, for how we can improve this, how we can change this, how we can make this work? And then group support. Do people want to spend more time on this? We got a 50-50 split. So you know what? We can't come to a consensus today. We can't move on. We can't bring this to a vote. Do people want to spend more time on this at this meeting, which means we're going to forego the next topic? And you might say, which is membership, because we're still on program. And that's okay. You might not get to all of your agenda items. You might need to move those to the next meeting. But if everybody says, no, we need to move on because we've got other things to talk about, then you have to be respectful and move on. So taking minutes, I'm just going to check my time here. Whose responsibility is it? In a volunteer organization, it really is everyone's responsibility to take minutes. It's unfair for you to think that your chair should be spending the time taking the minutes unless they feel that they want to do that. Maybe they're retired. Maybe it's something that they truly enjoy. Again, rotation schedule prior to the meeting. You could ask different people to do minutes. You could predetermine at the beginning of the meeting. I know Tom Manil will often be the minute taker. He enjoys doing it. He's good at it. He takes most of our minutes, so that's great. You can listen and record a brief summary of the meeting. So recording the meeting is a way to do it when you're on Zoom. And minutes should always be distributed shortly after the meeting or prior to the next meeting. If you're sending the minutes 15 minutes prior to the meeting and you're expecting people to pre-read that, that is really not a good use of people's time. You want to make sure that if you have minutes, you're sending them days ahead. And if you do receive your minutes days ahead, it is your responsibility as a committee or a board member to read them prior, because you're going to have to vote on those. Minutes are a legal document and can be admissible in a court of law. So if you can take notes, but if you take something that are called minutes and there is an opportunity to have a court case, they are admissible, where a note is not. So that is something of interest that you might want to know. Closing and follow-up, 15 minutes. That would bring me to, to the end of this session. So I've got to speed myself up, at least present this in 10 minutes so we've got some time for Q&A. And I put 10 minutes for Q&A at the end of my agenda, knowing that we probably are only going to spend 5 minutes on Q&A, and that's my wiggle room time. So when you're doing if you're ever doing a full day agenda, always make sure that your breaks are a little bit longer than what you're actually going to do, so that you can do a bit of catch up there in your timing. Because I always like to put a buffer in my agenda so that I know if I'm running over, I can make it up somewhere. Closing and follow-up. Keep on time, be results focused, watch your action items. Don't forget to celebrate success. Don't ever forget to say thank you, because you are taking people's time, especially in a volunteer organization, and make sure that you've got your next meeting slotted, and what date and what time are we going to do our meeting before you get off. Because otherwise you have to go back to the doodle poll, which as a chair takes you more time to figure out what date and time works. So you may as well do it while you're on the meeting. So how to end a meeting on time? Keep the content appropriate to the time allowed. It takes 2 minutes per slide. My slide presentation is 31 slides, and I'm going to be at 64 minutes by the time that I'm done. And so I should have, taken a couple of slides out so that I know that I'm going to be on time. If somebody tells you if they present to you and you say you've got 10 minutes to present and they come with 10 slides, they're going to take 20 minutes. They can tell you that they're all pictures and I can get through it in 10 minutes, but guaranteed they're going to run over. So if they have 10 minutes to present, 5 slides. That's your rule of thumb. End the meeting, give a 5-minute warning. Okay. Allow people to leave if the meeting goes over. So if the meeting goes over, be Just say, you know what, we're going another 5 minutes over time. We're going to go another 10 minutes over time. Those who want to stay are happy to stay. Those who want to leave for the sake of business because they have to go to another meeting because they have a life, please go ahead. But watch the quorum. Continue the meeting standing up. And that's a great one for when you are having in-person meetings, is do a stand-up meeting. If you want to have a short meeting, especially if you're in a workplace, you just want to bring people together for 15, 20 minutes, don't let them sit, because they will not let, as soon as they sit, they're getting comfortable, it will be a longer meeting. Decide to regroup at a later date, work the agenda, use a visible clock. I always like to have a clock in the conference room, in the boardroom, that people can see so that they know what the time is, or have, people looking at their cell phones, and stop the meeting when the work is done. So if your meeting finishes 10 minutes prior, stop talking. Just stop, end the meeting, and give people some free time. That rarely happens, but it might. Results focus. Keep the purpose of the meeting in mind. What are you trying to accomplish? We've talked about this. What does success look like? We've talked about that, and doing the flip chart at the beginning. Don't try to solve world peace in 60 minutes. If you're trying to decide whether you're going to have a rib fest or not, 60 minutes probably isn't enough. You probably need a 90-minute meeting or 2 60-minute meetings. So, be conscious of that. Chunk it down. Ensure the agenda reflects that. Use a go or no-go question throughout. So are we a go with this, or is this a no-go? And keep checking in with your members and your audience, whether they're with you or they're not with you. Have a short, organized conversation, and then make your decisions. And every meeting member is accountable for the overall result, and every individual at that meeting is accountable for the action items. It should not be the chair. If you're chairing something and you're walking away with every action item, you're doing it wrong, because you should be delegating. Action items should be SMART. They should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And a chair should not leave the meeting with all the action item. It is extremely important for a chair to delegate, delegate, delegate. Chair's responsibility is to make sure that all the members have takeaways and all the members are engaged in the project. And everyone loves success. So don't be afraid to start your meeting with a good news story. What went well since the last meeting? Let's focus on the positive. If you start going down the rabbit hole right at the beginning of your meeting as, oh my God, the sky's falling, it's not a good way to be. You want to be positive, especially in Rotary, because these are volunteers. And especially if you're inviting friends of Rotary, they want to feel like this is a fun place, a great place to belong to, that we're people of action, that we do things, we get things done, and we're happy. This is not a business. This is not about, the negative side of running a meeting. And plan a wrap-up party. I mean, I'm chairing the International Women's Day youth events. And you know what? We're going to get together. We're going to go to a roadhouse. We're going to have some pizza and some beer and, have some fun. And thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank yous always go a long way. As volunteers, you can never say thank you enough. Make sure that if your committee is doing something really great or you've achieved something, that you can actually go to your president and, make your committee the bell ringers for that day, or stand up in front of a Rotary meeting and let them know what you're doing, and call out your committee members by name and shout out the individual names. It's not just, oh, the program committee did something great, or the Rib Fest committee. It's like, it's Mary, it's Suzanne, it's Jim, it's Bob. And have fun with it. And never end a meeting without confirming the next meeting date, if at all possible. So pre-schedule your meetings. So what I do is I have a line item at the end of my agenda that says our next meeting is going to be on this date. And it's either blank or it's already decided. We meet every, the third Wednesday of every month at noon. So I've already got it in there. Or if it's one of those committees where you're deciding new meeting dates every time based on, do we need to meet in a week, 2 weeks, a month? That can be done at the end of the meeting, or again, you can use the doodle poll. But if you are going to use a doodle poll, action and make sure the minutes reflect that This is an action item. Sandy is going to go out and send a doodle poll, and she's going to do it by April 20th. And you're going to have to answer her by April the 22nd so that I can send out the agenda for the meeting date on this particular time on April the 25th for our meeting on April the 30th. So make sure that you're always timing ahead. And that is the end of my meeting. Now, it is 10:25. I allotted 10 minutes for questions, knowing that we would probably only need 5. I also had a closing video that's at 2 minutes, but if I play that closing video now, I'm not going to have a chance to take any questions. So I, as the chair of this particular meeting, have decided that I'm not going to show that closing video, which is just a fun little closure because I don't have the time. And I'm going to move on to Q&A, which says I have 10 minutes, but I'm down to 5, which is what I thought I would be in the beginning. So that's how you run a meeting and make sure that it ends on time. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to see if there are questions in the chat, which there are. And I hope that you enjoyed my session. I hope that you found that even though it was very wordy with lots of words in my presentation, that it did bring you some value, and that you might not have learned what every item of running a meeting or chairing a meeting is about today, but hopefully you've got 1 or 2 little gems that you can take away and go do something with. Okay, so the first question in my chat is, if we do not have a quorum at a board meeting, we make a consensus decision recorded in the minutes, then at the next following regular meeting, members pass a motion to accept those minutes to confirm the content of the activity. I like that. I think that is a very good suggestion. So what Doug is telling us is that when he has a board of director meeting, if they don't have a quorum, they'll still move forward and they'll get a consensus on all the motions, but then the action item for the following board meeting the next month will be to go through and make sure that there is a quorum, and then they will vote on those consensus at the next meeting. So sounds like, Doug, you've got yourself together, so good job. Thanks, Louise. Thanks, Louise. Very interesting. Thanks. What do you do when you have latecomers and no quorum? What do you do when you have latecomers? Again, I think what you could do is take Doug's suggestion, and something that I also mentioned in the presentation is that you could do your consensus on that topic, and then latecomers come in, and now you do have a quorum. So once you have a quorum, you can say to your board or your committee, we now have a quorum. I'm going to go back to the consensus that we had at this point in time. This is what we discussed. This is the consensus we came with. I'd like to bring it to a vote. Does anybody will anybody make a motion for that vote? Is there any further discussion? And then you talk about it, and then you take it to a vote. Good. What is a bell ringer? So we have a bell ringer at our committee, and there's 2 minutes left. I want to make sure I get to Romeo. We have a bell ringer where the president will ring the bell at an in-person meeting, or the fake bell at a Zoom meeting. Sometimes he just rings a bell verbally, and he calls out somebody that's done something really great since the last meeting, and we call those bell ringers. And it's really the president's choice as to who he makes a bell ringer. Okay, Romeo, go ahead. What's your question?
I'll try to make this 30 seconds. I was reading Doug's message, and I think one may misinterpret it because it says at the following regular meeting. In my view, I don't think that the minutes of the board meeting should be approved at a regular meeting because the regular members weren't participants.
Correct. So what
so I'll leave that to you to
what I
clarify.
would say, and maybe what Doug means is that sometimes, especially if you're meeting in person and you know your board member, the quorum of your board member are going to be there, you could actually hold a mini board meeting at the end of a regular meeting and then do your motions there as well. We've
absolutely
done
that. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay,
but
thank you.
You are correct. You would not bring that forward to the club. That would be only the directors. So whether the directors, you had a small parking lot meeting before, if you notice you've got a quorum and they're standing at the bar, you could go and do it there. prior to the drink, or you could do it at the end of your meeting. I'd like to call a quick board meeting. Could the board members stay behind for 5 minutes so you could get your quorum up? Great. One last question before we close. Notice I didn't. Notice that, Siri's answering me. Notice that I didn't say, does anybody have a question? Because that's a yes or no answer. One of the things as a chair is to always use open-ended questions. So what is one more, what last question do you have? And so that's open-ended, which is another meeting on how to do that. Now listen, I don't know if you can hear it, but my cell phone's going crazy. It's chiming at me. The meeting is done. I'm done talking. So I'm going to stop my timer. It is now 10:30 and I'm going to pass it over to Suzanne to close out. You're on mute, Suzanne.
Thank you very much, Louise, for this very informative presentation. I am absolutely certain that we all learned several things or were reminded of something that we had learned before. This recorded session will be available in a few days on the district's YouTube channel and on the training committee section on the district website. Please note that the next session will be on Monday, March 27th at 7 p.m. Past District Governor Leslie Barmania and myself will have a session on the Rotary Foundation. If you have not yet registered, there is still time to do so, and I'm looking forward to seeing many of you there. Thank you again, Louise, for presenting and for attending this training session. I also want to say quick thanks to Mary Brady and Doug Vincent to be on the host team, and to the entire training team for all their work and support. Have a great weekend all, and see you soon.
Thank you so much, Louise. It was a really great presentation.
You're welcome.
Enjoy your weekend, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I'd say safe
learned
travels.
a lot.
But, yeah,
excellent.
You're welcome, Romeo. I'd say safe travels, but you're all in your offices or your kitchens. So go enjoy the rest of your morning. Have a great coffee. Thanks, Romeo.
Thank you. Thanks, Louise. That was awesome.